Flying an A-10 into the Karakoram range is suicide. Every pilot knows those ridges thin air. Crosswinds like knives. Hidden missile nests waiting in the dark. Extraction there's impossible. The kind of terrain that swallows helicopters and radar alike. Yet when 32 Navy SEALs were ambushed inside that labyrinth of rock and ice, one grounded pilot broke every rule. Captain Jordan Hayes launched alone in a crippled Warthog with no targeting system, racing against time. Her past mistakes and a kill zone designed to be inescapable. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from and if you believe honor and courage still matter. Help keep their legacy alive. The mountains of the Karakoram Range stretched like jagged blades against a pale Afghan sky. Snow crusted the highest ridges while the valleys below hid shadows where no aircraft radar could see. On this morning, 32 Navy SEALs were deep in those valleys and a storm of gunfire was closing in. At Kandahar Airfield, the alarm had not sounded yet. Captain Jordan Hayes sat at a steel desk, flipping through inventory logs instead of flight plans, stacks of forms, maintenance checklists, and spare parts orders. This was the prison her career had become. She was 27. She had trained for war, earned her wings, and flown the A-10 Thunderbolt with precision. But one mistake in training had chained her here. The memory lived inside her skull like shrapnel. A mock strike over a desert range. She squeezed the trigger a fraction too early, and practice rounds tore into a zone marked for friendly armor. No one had died, but an MRAP was shredded, and the men inside had been seconds from disaster. Her commander's verdict was swift grounder, too reckless, too unstable. Jordan replayed that day every time she heard the hydraulic whine of an A-10 turning on the flight line. Every time the cannon roared in the distance, her heart clenched. She could almost hear the imagined screams of men she almost killed. Major Kirkland, her commanding officer now, believed she was useful only for logistics. He said it to her face once, "Hayes, you're steady with numbers. Stick to the clipboard." Since then, she was buried in paper, forgotten in war. Only one man still treated her like a pilot, Captain Marcus Garrett. Years ago, when her A-10 caught fire after a hard landing, Garrett had pulled her from the cockpit seconds before the jet exploded. He carried the scars across his left forearm to prove it. Now, whenever she hinted about flying again, Garrett's voice turned hard. "I saved you once. Don't make me watch you burn twice." It wasn't contempt. It was fear. But fear didn't stop Jordan from sneaking into the simulator after hours. She knew the systems better than anyone in her squadron. Night after night, she flew secret missions across the digital terrain of Afghanistan, programming weather, altitude, enemy guns into each run. Her obsession was one valley in particular, narrow, twisting, crosswinds howling like knives. Every briefing called it a no-fly zone, but Jordan studied it anyway, memorizing rocks, ravines, and wind patterns because deep down she believed someday real men would be trapped there and command would call it impossible, and she would be the only one who knew the angles. She taped maps across her wall in the small quarters where she lived alone. Colored pins, dotted ridges, and choke points. She had marked yellow zones where helicopters could never land. Red zones where surface-to-air missiles would hide. Blue zones where only an A-10's cannon could thread the line. Every pin was a warning, but also a promise. If the call came, she'd be ready. Her body remembered every dive, every burst of fire. But her mind carried the ghost of that training accident, whispering she'd fail again. That morning at Kandahar, she heard the low thunder of engines outside. Pilots walked to their jets, helmets tucked under their arms while she signed off fuel manifests for aircraft she wasn't allowed to fly. Her fingers itched to wrap around a control stick instead of a pen. Garrett stopped by her office, still in flight gear. He leaned on the doorway and gave her a look that mixed pity and frustration. "You ever think maybe this is where you belong? Keeping the rest of us alive with the details?" Jordan didn't answer. If she opened her mouth, the bitterness would spill out. She just stared at the photo of her A-10 taped above her desk. The nose art still clear, Iron Angel. By noon, the sun hammered the airfield into a mirage. Her shift dragged in the hum of printers and the scrape of boots across concrete. The war felt miles away, though she knew it was only beyond those mountains. Then, at 1400, the base sirens split the air. Red lights flashed across the operations building. Everyone froze for a half-second before rushing to their stations. Special operations team in contact. A voice shouted from the radio bay. 2 SEAL squads under heavy fire in Karakoram range. Grid 97 Alpha requesting immediate air support. Jordan's pen dropped. Her chest tightened as if the words were meant only for her. The coordinates were the very valley she had rehearsed again and again. Inside the ops center, Major Kirkland barked orders, already shaking his head. Too steep for insertion. Helicopters are out. F-16S inbound from Kandahar. ETA 20 minutes. He glanced at the map and muttered, "They won't make it in time." Jordan pressed closer, ignored the glares from other officers. She knew what the red pins on her own map meant. F-16S couldn't strike that valley without risking the SEALs themselves. Static crackled over the speakers. Then the voice of a SEAL commander. Tight but steady. "This is Reaper 1. We're cut off. Ammo's low. If you can't get birds over us in 10, we're done." The room went silent. Jordan's nails dug into her palms. This was it. The impossible scenario she had trained for alone in the dark. And she was stuck behind a desk with ghosts in her head and no orders in her hands. But deep inside, a decision had already begun to form. The same decision that had haunted her dreams and kept her awake in the simulator at 3 in the morning. If no one else would fly that valley, she would. And as the ops center erupted in desperate chatter, Captain Jordan Hayes quietly turned away. Her heartbeat kept rhythm with the siren. Somewhere out there, 32 men were waiting for a miracle. The command center smelled of sweat and hot electronics. Screens glowed with maps of the Karakoram range. Valleys lit in red where enemy fire cut off escape. Voices overlapped, sharp and clipped, each second heavier than the last. Major Kirkland stood in front of the main display. His tone flat. F-16S will arrive in 17 minutes. They'll strike the outer ridges. Open a path for helicopters if possible. But everyone knew the truth. Strike jets couldn't touch targets pressed that close to the SEALs. The radio carried the SEAL leader's voice again. "We've lost 3 already. 30 minutes of ammunition left. If air doesn't clear those ridges, we're gone." A silence followed, as if even the machines in the room were listening. Jordan stood at the back, unnoticed at first, her eyes locked on the digital map. Every ridge familiar, every choke point burned in her memory. She whispered under her breath, "That's the valley. That's the one." Kirkland slammed his hand on the console. "No warthogs, too narrow, too many missiles. We won't waste aircraft." To him, it was settled. Doctrine closing the door. Garrett, helmet still under his arm, stepped forward. "I'll say it clear. Anyone flying that canyon isn't coming back alive." His words carried the weight of a man who'd seen pilots burn. Jordan clenched her jaw. She had trained for this exact map, this exact ambush. The odds were terrible, but so were the odds for the 32 men on the ground. When the meeting broke, she followed Garrett into the corridor. He turned before she could speak. "Don't even think it. I know that look." She forced herself to meet his eyes. "You know I can fly that canyon." His face hardened. "I also know what happens when you squeeze the trigger and freeze. You almost killed your own once. You think that ghosts won't follow you down there." The words hit harder than she expected. Her throat tightened, but she refused to look away. "If I don't try, they're dead. That's worse than my fear." Garrett lowered his voice, almost a plea. "I pulled you out of fire once. Don't make me bury you because you can't forgive yourself." Then he walked off, shoulders rigid, leaving her alone with the echo. Back in the hangar, mechanics worked over a line of 810s. One jet sat apart tail, number 187 fueled but grounded. A tech muttered, "Guidance system fried, targeting computer glitches out every run. No one's touching it." Jordan ran her hand along the titanium skin. The warthog felt like an old warhorse, battle-worn yet waiting. Her mind ticked through every manual calculation she had memorized. The angles, the drift, the way bullets fell without a computer telling her where. She asked the crew chief quietly. Systems functional besides the guidance. Engine strong, hydraulic solid, full load of ammo. She'll fly but blind. He gave a short laugh. Wouldn't put my worst enemy in that seat today. To Jordan, it was no joke. The broken guidance system meant the fight would be raw instinct, not electronics. It was suicide by the book, but survival by feel. She returned to her quarters, locked the door, and pulled open the drawer by her bunk. Inside lay a folded letter she had written weeks ago, a letter meant for no one unless she never came back. She added one line at the bottom. If you read this, know I chose to act when others chose to wait. Her hands trembled only once, then steadied. Flight suit zipped. Himmel over her shoulder, boots laced tight. Every motion felt final, but also right. On her way out, she nearly collided with Garrett. He saw the helmet, the fire in her eyes. Don't, he said, voice low but desperate. Not you. Not like this. Jordan's answer was quiet, almost gentle. You saved me once, but this time it's not about me. Then she walked past him, steps echoing against the hangar floor. The warthog loomed in front of her, bathed in harsh floodlights. Tex shouted questions, but she climbed the ladder without answering. Every clank of her boots on metal sounded like a countdown. Cockpit closed. Engines roared alive. Twin turbines shaking the air. She checked gauges by muscle memory, ignoring the blank guidance system glass in front of her. Control tower crackled with confusion. Tail 187. You are not cleared for departure. Repeat, not cleared. She flipped her comms to tactical only, muting the protests. If she listened, doubt would return. Garrett appeared at the edge of the runway, waving his arms. His mouth moved, but she couldn't hear him through the canopy. Her chest ached at the sight, but her hand stayed firm on the stick. Brake release. Throttle forward. The A-10 lunged down the strip, engines screaming into the night. As the wheels lifted free of the asphalt, Jordan Hayes whispered to herself, no guidance, no second chances, just me and them. The Karakoram range waited in the dark ahead, and 32 men prayed she would get there first. The night sky swallowed her warthog as she climbed above Kandahar. Cloud banks rolled across the horizon, hiding the jagged teeth of the Karakoram range. Every vibration of the cockpit reminded her she was flying blind. The guidance system glass flickered with static, then died completely. No reticle, no guiding box, no safety net. She whispered to herself, it's just steel sky and me. Radio crackled with the SEAL commander's voice. 15 minutes of ammo left. Enemy closing from 3 sides. Gunfire and shouts bled through the transmission. Jordan banked east, hugging the contour she had studied for months. Her eyes searched the moonlit ridges, memorizing shapes like old scars. The map in her head guided her better than any screen ever could. In the command center, Kirkland barked into his headset. Confirmed tail 187 airborne. Who authorized this? Peterson answered grimly. Sir, it's Hayes. Garrett stood frozen near the display. He knew her pattern. The low-altitude trace on radar unmistakable. His lips moved with words he didn't say. Please don't fail this time. The valley opened beneath her. A black wound carved into the mountains. Tracer fire arced upward like angry sparks. Her warning light screamed. Missile lock detected. Instinct took over. She yanked the stick, dove into the canyon at a reckless angle. The missile streaked past, exploding harmlessly against rock. Below, the SEALs huddled in craters, muzzles flashing in bursts. In the ops center, the feed from drones showed the impossible. Hayes was threading rounds within 30 meters of friendlies without a single blue on blue. Kirkland swore under his breath, half in rage, half in disbelief. Garrett whispered, she's doing it. God help her. She's actually doing it. No one replied. Every eye stayed locked on the screen, as if willing her to survive. Jordan's jet shuddered. Warning lights blazed red, hydraulic pressure dipping. Shrapnel from an RPG had clipped her wing. She gritted her teeth, forced the stick level. The bird held together, battered but willing. Not yet, she muttered. You'll hold for me. Below, the seals began moving, darting toward an opening she had carved. One shouted over radio corridor clear. "We got a way out." Her chest swelled, but the fight wasn't over. On the far ridge, muzzle flashes erupted from hidden cave. If they reached that kill zone, the seals would be shredded. It was the final choke point, her last shot. She banked hard, engines straining, nose down, canyon walls closing in, alarm shrieking. Her eyes locked on the cave mouth. This was the distance of her worst nightmare, the exact angle where she had once pulled wrong. Her pulse pounded, sweat stinging her eyes. She steadied her breathing, shut out every ghost, only the mountain, the target, the men below. Her finger pressed the trigger, firm and final. The cannon spat fire. Rounds slammed into the cave. Collapsing stone, silencing the guns. Silence followed, broken only by SEAL radios, screaming relief. "Thunderbolt, you did it." Paths open were moving. Cheers echoed through the valley. Men sprinting toward escape. Jordan's hands shook, but the warthog held steady. She exhaled, a long breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She had done what no one else dared. But in the pit of her stomach, a weight remained. A report came through SEAL comms, almost drowned by static cave system, civilians inside. One casualty confirmed. Jordan froze. The ground tilted, though her jet flew straight. Her vision blurred, chest heavy. She had saved 32, but taken one. The SEALs moved through the corridor she had carved, boots pounding the rocky floor. Gunfire faded behind them, replaced by the thrum of inbound helicopters. They were alive because one pilot refused to let them die. Jordan circled above, watching their strobes flicker in the dark. Relief surged through her chest, but the report from the cave clung like a shadow. One civilian dead, buried in stone, she had collapsed. Her radio buzzed with gratitude. "Thunderbolt, you're the reason we're breathing. We owe you our lives." She answered with silence, because words tasted like ash. Back at Kandahar, the ops center hummed with disbelief. Kirkland leaned on the console, jaw tight, as updates streamed in. "Extraction complete. 0 friendly casualties," Peterson reported. No one dared mention the civilian, but Jordan felt it with every beat of her heart as she turned the jet home. The warthog limped across the sky, warning lights still glowing red. Her landing gear clunked down rough. Hydraulics groaning, the tires screeched against asphalt, sparks flashing before the plane slowed to a crawl. She guided it to a halt, canopy hissing open. The night air hit her face, heavy with jet fumes. No applause, no cheering crowd, only the weight of silence and a few figures waiting near the ladder. Garrett stood at the front, helmet tucked under his arm. His eyes said more than any words. Anger, fear, relief twisted together. "You came back," he muttered when she climbed down. "I did," she whispered, then almost to herself. But not all of them did. Garrett's brow furrowed. He knew she meant more than soldiers. Major Kirkland approached, hands behind his back. "Captain Hayes, you disobeyed direct orders, stole government property, and risked international scandal." Each word fell like a hammer. She stood at attention, boots firm, eyes forward. "Yes, sir." Her voice didn't waver. Kirkland paused. His gaze flicked toward the hangar where the SEALs were unloading. "Alive because of her. Your unauthorized actions also saved 32 American operators who'd been written off." The room seemed to hold its breath. Garrett shifted, ready to defend her if it came to that. Kirkland finally sighed. "You won the battle, but you also broke the rules. That contradiction will follow you forever." He stepped closer, voice low. "And war doesn't erase what happened in that cave. Remember that." Jordan nodded once. She didn't argue, didn't beg, because he was right. Later, she sat alone outside the barracks. The mountains loomed faintly on the horizon, dark against starlight. Her helmet rested beside her, the visor reflecting the faint glow of floodlights. She thought of the SEALs, battered but alive, boarding helicopters with weary smiles. She thought of the cave, silent now, where stone had fallen on someone who hadn't been an enemy at all. The price of her victory was written in both scenes. Garrett found her there, sitting in the dust. He dropped down beside her, forearm scars catching the light. You saved them, he said softly. Jordan shook her head. I killed too. Her voice cracked on the last word. He looked at her for a long time. No one walks out clean, Hayes. Not me. Not you. Not anyone who's been here. His tone wasn't harsh. It was weary, honest. She pulled her knees up, staring at the helmet. The engine roar is the only thing that keeps the ghosts quiet, she admitted. Now, I don't know if it's drowning them out or adding more.